can only be here for an hour. Thank you, Mark. I can only be here for an hour today. We don't have a very heavy agenda, so we might just be able to, conclude everything within an hour. But if things, if everybody or some number of people want to continue discussing something past that hour mark, David's here and
the other David, right?
right, one of the Davids. So yeah, anyway, let's go ahead and get started. There's not much to review on the agenda. Is there anything that anybody would like to add to the agenda today? No, okay. So why don't we just jump in? I thought since we do have a rather light one, we could use that as an opportunity to discuss the community conversation, the next community conversation. And we've kind of touched on this for a few meetings, but never really settled on anything. So I did send Mark today a survey that he forwarded to the group. And that could just be a way that we can vote on potential topics. And I know that we voted in the past, but that was like several conversations ago that we settled on like a ranking, and we've had some new members come, and we've also had kind of a change in the format. So we're doing that a shorter format, or we have been. So it might be time to just revisit our rankings for all of those topics and see if there's anything else that anybody feels like we should add, and then we can try to settle on something. So any thoughts about community conversation topics? I'm trying to find this.
David.
Hi, David Gold. Hi.
Hi.
Hi. Just FYI, we can hear you if you're
right. There was something wrong on our end, but he's good
okay.
now.
Okay,
good.
perfect. Yeah, let me pull up the. Oops. Okay, so just to review, the topics that we have remaining, of the ones that we all threw in as potential topics and voted on. By the way, did anybody not get that link to the survey? Everybody has it, okay. So the topics were a day in your carbon footprint, an economist perspective on climate change, agriculture and climate change, local efforts and climate change and permafrost, human overpopulation and carrying capacity of the planet, plastic pollution and its role in acidifying the ocean, and then those were the topics that we have remaining. We had discussed as well in previous meetings that it would make sense to tailor our conversation to be more relevant to the local area, because these topics are presumably covered in other spaces, in other forums, in other videos online and whatnot. So to be in an effort to add something novel or new and more relevant to local, putting a local spin on it was recommended, and generally I think people agreed with that. Yeah, go ahead, David.
Yeah, I just have a question. Were these in any order? Were these in the order in which we prioritized them, or did we prioritize them? I'm actually a little unclear about that.
You mean like the previous vote that we took?
Yeah, we took a vote to prioritize them, but it was kind of a soft vote, I think.
Yeah, they're not in any order. They're just copied from the original list. I do have those numbers of how many voted for each one. If it's helpful, I can go over that as well. But yeah.
Let's do without that, because that might give us a more a better chance to
bias.
more freely, yeah, to look at this again a second time, so.
Sure. So any thoughts? I mean, go ahead, Melissa.
Yeah, just another kind of clarifying question on this. Are we also accepting new ideas during this time as well?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
I can edit the survey, in fact, so I can just add something if you want.
Nice. I guess this idea comes from I believe a conversation, a previous meeting, where I think it was mentioned that a vulnerability assessment was being done for Alachua County. I think in terms of specifically looking at flooding resilience. Is that right, Mark? Do you know?
Well, flooding's a major component of it. In fact, I have not viewed it yet, but if you want to go, there was the Climate Change Advisory Committee had a presentation on the overall vulnerability assessment. This was on last Monday night. So I envision it's up on the YouTube, and I was going to look at it and see. I'm sorry, it's been covered up, but Jones Edmonds, who's doing the survey, was going to give just a short general overview of that. They could envision we could have them give a presentation. It would be a problem. I mean, to give it to EPAC as well. Or if you wanted to do the forum method, that's an option as well. But there's so little detail right now in that. I don't know that a forum would get that much attention, or not as much information will be relayed as it would be after or close to completion, which I think is probably a year, but I have to check and see on that. But that's a good question, I think, to about the vulnerability assessment. So it has commenced, let's put it that way. So
Thanks. Yeah. And the reason I asked, I think it's nice to be able to, I think it would be really cool to be able to tie in the conversation around something that's, happening in Alachua County. So I was thinking vulnerability in terms of flooding, but then also reflecting on the last conversation we had to do with minimum flows and levels, and thinking kind of about the water quality and quantity component of climate change. And being able to just reflect that back into, and this is what's happening at the Alachua County level, to be able to allow people to process it, because water quality issues at scale are really complicated and a lot to digest. So I like that concept of localizing the issue as much as we can. So those were two ideas that I was thinking about.
Yeah, I like that. So with the first one, the vulnerability assessment, I mean, based on what Mark says, there's only so much that we can cover, I guess, until after a year has passed, or until the assessment comes around.
I think also maybe it could be a bit of a primer for either waiting until it comes back around, or the state as a whole is embarking on a statewide resilience planning effort. So kind of getting people prepped for that process too.
Yeah, and making them aware of the statewide resilience plan, and then kind of what encompasses a vulnerability assessment and why it's important. And we're in the process of coming up with one for Alachua County, that kind of thing, to give them a context for it before it comes out.
Yeah, exactly.
I like that. Okay, so let's see, Florida. What's it called? Just a resilience plan?
Yeah, resilience planning.
And Alachua County vulnerability assessment. Okay, I'll add that. And then the other one was with water quality issues locally, and maybe tying that in with some of the things we discussed at the last meeting with the BMAP and the MFLs.
Yeah, maybe drivers of water quality issues, and I guess the regulation that's associated with it.
Yeah, okay, great.
And I just like to second the idea of just keeping this next one local.
Yeah. Okay, let me save that. All right, so if anybody has that survey open, hopefully that change is propagated and you can see it. Yeah, okay, cool. Thank you, Melissa. I like those as well. George says, regarding carbon trading and its feeble efficacy, given that the rate of climate change is so rapidly increasing, is it even considered a realistic tool anymore? That's a good question. I don't know. I don't know, but that reminds me, just to throw it out, I guess I can leave. Well, I'm not going to be here maybe for the end, so I just I'll throw it out now. There's a film that's going to air, I think on Friday, Carbon, the Unauthorized Biography. I saw it on Catherine Hayhoe's Twitter. She tweeted it out, and she's kind of a curator of very relevant climate change related content. So I'll throw a link to that in the chat if anybody's interested. Anyway, yeah, so I guess, George, your point is maybe the carbon issue is not so relevant or important anymore.
Well, there is some people would think that it is just a smoke and mirror ploy by big polluters, and that it, given how fast things are changing, it may not be, as I said in the writing there, an effective method to aggressively, rapidly make changes. I don't know. I have a feeling that it's an easy wink, wink way that corporations can just keep on doing what they'd like to do, and even local businesses, conceivably. So should this even be considered as a subject for? And that's not just, I'm throwing that up as a sort of checking on whether it's something we should even focus on. I don't know who else out there thinks that way, but I think Bob Palmer feels also that it's just a game.
I see. So basically a conversation topic around that, around carbon trading's efficacy and whether or not it's like a feasible way of combating climate change.
Well, I don't know if it's worthy of even, we should decide perhaps as a group whether we feel it is something that we should question now, or should we put our chips on some more immediate and more important method of improving. Do we want to alert people to new techniques, or do we, I don't know what, it all depends on what the goal of the group is.
Yeah.
There's so many ways you can dice this.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think two things come to mind with that. One being it would require kind of probably more internal research and maybe having speakers and whatnot to this group before we even decide kind of how we would want to present that.
Yeah.
Which I mean is fine. And then I don't know how we would kind of, I guess it could potentially relate specifically to some local business politics and whatnot, but it does seem like more of a global issue.
Yeah, also, I think that we'd be better off focusing on things that we feel confident can be done
Yeah.
locally. And this is aspirational in my estimation.
Yeah, but I mean, it is an interesting thing to kind of question, and maybe we can do that as a group in some capacity.
Yep.
Go ahead, David. Did you have your?
Yeah, I was going to say it might be a way to deal with it is we have maybe several other items along with it in which we're saying, these are things that may be looked at as, and, whether they'll work or won't work. And then we could, pretty much out it as being something that, is not necessarily going to work and that we probably don't need to spend a lot of time on. Whereas maybe other techniques, we can go for. So, and there are a bunch of other techniques, obviously, I think dealing with carbon is one, but dealing with specifically, gas, natural gas and methane, it's probably more important, to put in front of that in terms of right now we're so close to going over, if we're not already over, the 1.5 limit that the UN set, perhaps, focusing on the highest, additions to climate change, such as natural gas are the way to go with this. And maybe there are some others that we can do the most in the shortest period of time that, everyone's just kind of banging their head up against the wall and not seeing, seeing the forest for the trees. I mean, we all get lost in the, in all of the mess that this is all providing. But we know that there are certain things that, we can focus on that will make a fairly large change, and we can do those things fast. Maybe that's what we should be focusing on, because no one's doing anything right now, it seems to me.
Yeah, focusing on fast seems to make good sense rather than, yeah.
Go ahead, Bruce.
Yes, in reading recent news things about the blue-green algae in Noonan's Lake, I was wondering if a topic at some point couldn't be something like, is climate change poisoning our waters, or is climate change poisoning Noonan's Lake? That could get people's attention. It certainly is a local issue. And we could probably get quite a few people from the university from around that could discuss that sort of thing. Obviously, it's more than just the rise in temperature that's providing that, but it might be a topic at some point to get people's interest. Thank you.
Yeah, I like that. So I would let me add that as a topic. So like basically saying, is climate change affecting or damaging, and then fill in like some local body of water to make it relevant, like Noonan's Lake or something. Okay.
So I think, sorry to hop in out of line, but in terms of the water quality component of Noonan's Lake and how climate change acts as a driver for accelerating things that we've already exacerbated as issues, right? Like overuse of the aquifer and additional nutrients loading into those systems are exacerbated by climate change. So I don't think that has to be its own separate topic. I think that could be the purview into the water quality component. Like that's the conversation of water quality, right? Is like, where is it right now? And how is climate changing it? And on the, pragmatic side of how we regulate our water, is it effective, and how in Alachua County residents in that. And the blue-green algae is a perfect example. There's a blue-green algae task force that was set up by the governor. Dr. Mark Rains is the chair on that. There's some great faculty from the University of Florida that are actually on that advisory committee. So yeah, it's very timely too with Lake Noonan's, but lots of harmful algal blooms have been happening over the past decade.
So, did you have a follow-up to that, Bruce? I heard a voice.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you if you could get any one of those people to come speak to the board.
Of the folks I just listed, I don't think that those folks would come and speak. But there's definitely some University of Florida experts in Alachua County that can absolutely speak to the impacts of algal blooms, and also at the district level as well. Maybe less so Swanee River, but St. John's, and we're in their district boundary as Alachua County residents. So we could certainly have someone come and do that specifically to us, or for this community conversation, have them spend their time doing that as well.
Yeah, and I'm more interested in the Santa Fe River, because that is bordered on, the entire northern, border of Alachua County. So if we get someone that, could also cover that, that would be important.
Isn't the
What I was-
overarching driving force nutrient enrichment and temperature change or climate change being a secondary drive, and minimum flows in rivers like the Santa Fe, that in combination with nutrient enrichment from farms and fertilizers, and to me, my understanding was those are the two driving primary forces. Is that true or not, do you think?
Correct. Those are, I'd say, your
Yeah.
primary bases, and then climate change exacerbates it, right? It makes
Yeah.
those occurrences
Yeah.
happen more frequently and prolonged.
Yeah, I was just thinking in saying something about Noonan's Lake, which people are sort of aware of what's going on there. It's a hook to bring in perhaps people from the outside that aren't ordinarily interested in some of these conversations, something to get their attention because they know about it. But
Yeah.
certainly can be part of, it's not just climate change that's doing it, but I just thought of it as a hook.
Good idea.
Yeah. So just looking at, because Melissa, you threw out drivers of water quality issues and their associated regulation. And then Bruce, your issue is climate change damaging Noonan's Lake, for example. Sounds like potentially a way, I mean, those could be two different topics that we're considering, or we could be talking about maybe the same talk, but your subject or your title, Bruce, is a way of capturing people's attention so that we can then talk about those drivers of water quality issues and associated regulation. Does that sound right? Okay.
Yeah, and I see that the water quality all by itself is an important subject. I mean, I agree with Melissa that, that climate change is really just, exacerbates, the problem by the fact that the heat raises, the amount of algae that actually can grow and how fast it grows. But I don't see it as being, the quote, a big deal. I don't see it as being a big part of it. I see the biggest part is just, it's a pollution problem. And, between that and overuse of water in general, we're going to be in deeper doo-doo than we are just from climate change, which may be bad enough, but we're going to be in pretty bad condition if we don't have any drinkable water.
Yeah.
And by the way, I don't think that, the idea of everyone saying, well, it's not really a horrible thing if the fresh water in the state all goes bad, because we can always, desalinate from the ocean. And more, that's being proven to not be a true statement, because they're dumping some stuff in the ocean that can't be taken out of it, including, the radiation that gets coming from Japan and other things. And if we can't take that pollution out, we can't take radiation out, for example, if we can't take some of the pollution that's being dumped in, and we don't know how to, then, we're not going to be able to desalinate ocean water, either. So we need to take better care of our water, or, life on this planet is going to go south,
There's another problem with massive
so-
amounts of desalination, and that is that when you do that, you change the local chemistry of the water in the environment in which the plant is, and you torpedo the viability of the ecosystems surrounding those plants, those facilities.
Good point. Go ahead, George. Other George.
Yeah, I guess I want to step back a few steps. On our previous conversations, do we have any sense of how effective we have been at getting at sort of what I would consider to be the target audience, rather than mostly sort of paid mourners, so to speak? do we have any sense of how many people have signed on to the recordings? And do we have any sense of whether or not we're getting at the people that really don't know very much and are interested in learning? Because I'm looking at the list here and I really only see one, and that's the one at the top that in my mind really sort of gets at some things that people, the general person out there that really is, it's a workaday person and they're really not paying it, not that they're not paying attention, they're not digging into these topics, and there's a lot for them to learn. And I think we can cover several of these issues that we've been talking about here if we were to go after that audience. So I guess it's more of a question to us.
How do you think we could do that, George?
Do what?
How do you think we could best do that? How can we get, to those, to that audience, and how can we determine, whether we're getting to the people we really want to get to?
Well, I don't know that we could easily do it at the live when we were live, but I guess I'm just asking what our sense is. Are we getting at that kind of audience? I would think we, just my humble opinion, I think we would want to get at that audience with fairly simple, everyday kinds of bring up and remind people that when you fertilize your lawn, blah, 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 when you wash your car, blah, 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 getting at this carbon footprint, about everyday lifestyles. Are there take-home lessons and things that everybody could think about and maybe modify? At least it would help in that regard, but it would also serve as more of an education for people to understand a little better and maybe even spread the word, so to speak. I worry that if we attack these things at the middle or the high level and bring in these scientists, that I just wonder if we're sort of shooting over the head of a lot of people. Yeah, we might get, a few dozen people that sign on, but I just wonder about the impact that we're having. Anyway, I'm just sitting here thinking out loud.
Do you think
Sure,
more?
no, it's a
I was
good
gonna say,
thought.
do you think more of a real town hall kind of approach to this would do it? I mean, to have someone, maybe someone from the Board of County Commissioners, or a couple of them, there to answer questions of citizens, but keep the questions, to within the areas that we're talking about here, so we can find out, what basically, maybe start off with a short session of, what we as people, as individuals, as citizens, can do, just in our daily lives to help, both with the climate change and with pollution. And then, have thereafter then go to questions from the citizenry, which is trying to get everyone involved to ask their county commissioners what they are doing to solve various kinds of problems related to the climate and to pollution.
Well, as long as we've been thinking about, as long as I've been associated with this committee and we've been doing these community conversations, it's been a question I've asked over and over again. Are we really hitting and getting good attendance and engagement with the audience that we really would like to bring the educational level up a notch or two? And also, we have the other climate committee, and I just wonder about sort of getting too far out, in the science realm. And I'm a scientist, so I'm all for science, but it just seems to me that we've got to bring along some people before we get too far ahead of ourselves. Again, I'm just
climate change for dummies.
well, no, yeah. something
I put myself in the category.
something where we get folks to to say, hey, that sounds interesting, I want to go listen to what they have to say.
Sure. Melissa, did you have input on this?
Yeah, I'll definitely echo George's sentiment in terms of doing something that is intentional and reaches the intended audience. And I agree. It seems like climate change, this is my short understanding of being on the board, isn't really the purview of what EPAC is about, considering that there's another advisory board that's focused on climate change. And so I think the concept of focusing in on something local that matters to whoever the group of folks we're trying to engage is, and make it digestible. Like, you know, not everyone signs up their time to have conversations about this in their free time, but making it meaningful and approachable is really important. And I am curious in terms of selecting topics, have we in the past, or is this something we have the capacity to do, asked what folks from Alachua County would be interested in learning about or hearing about? We could just do a free response survey, just try and get a sense of what people are interested in learning, to get a sense of what the benchmark is.
I
That's
like
a
that
good
idea.
suggestion. Yeah, I like that too. Just a quick comment about the Climate Change Action Committee, and our like peculiar fascination with climate change for our community conversations. It was kind of, they were, if memory serves, like they kind of came into existence around the same time that we were talking about doing conversations around climate change. And so we were put in this kind of strange position of, okay, this is something that we've decided is important to focus on. And there's this other group that's kind of sprung up that's addressing that issue. And we did have, at the time he was either the chair or he was in some position like that, of the CCAC, came to one of our meetings, and we kind of talked to him about how, you know, our relationship would function, and, you know, we were thinking about having these community conversations and so on. And my understanding or my memory of that conversation was he more or less said, you know, we're still very much in the planning stages. We're not really ready to really publicly interface a whole lot with people. So if you want to focus conversations around, I'm like very heavily paraphrasing based on memory, so this could be entirely wrong, but I think it was something like, go ahead, and if you want to address climate change, we're not really doing a whole lot of outreach at this point. We're sort of more in the planning stages as the CCAC. So just to give you a little context and a little more sense of why we're like seemingly stepping on their, overlapping with their territory, so to speak.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Because I think, you know, and I can't remember, sorry, who was discussing this, but when you think about the more like simplistic equation of environmental issues that we're having, climate change is absolutely a component of that equation, but there are base inputs that don't have to do with climate as a driver, right? You know, thinking about water quality, inputs to the system, withdrawals. I mean, a community conversation around fertilizer bans. What are they? Why did Alachua County do one? How does it work? Thinking about, yeah, I guess more tidbits, but seeing what people want to hear and what they want to understand, I think would be an interesting step for us to take too.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
So let's put a survey together.
And then, well, I want to let me bookmark this, and then we'll get Bettina and Bruce's input, and then we'll circle back to this public survey. Go ahead, Bettina.
Well, so there were a lot of different aspects touched upon, and so I just have a few random comments. Well, first of all, I think I've also touched on this before. I personally, I am an environmentalist, 100%. at the same time, I'm really tired of these climate change conversations. It's just, it starts to rub me the wrong way. And I don't really like being told what to do all the time. Hey, you should do this. Don't use that much water. Don't do that. Don't do that. I think a lot of us know this. And I also think, the climate change for dummies audience, they know that too. I think we don't give them enough credit. I think they know. So if we continue with climate change, I am looking for solutions that public entities in the county or the city, the county for us, could do. And by public entity, I mean the commission, maybe schools, I don't know, libraries, whatever is of public service. And whatever they could implement to reduce their carbon footprint and then lead by example. So I could go with that, but not, I don't want to hear another climate change conversation where we are being preached what we should do. I think it's too much. And I also heard Melissa, there are so many other interesting topics for EPAC, the Environmental Protection Advisory Committee, that we really could address. And then I also touched a little bit on this, circling back to George, because he wanted to know if we reach the target audience. So I guess the question is, who is the target audience? And I guess, I'm assuming that the target audience is the dummies. And then, how do you reach the dummies? And that's Bruce Blackwell's suggestion. I really like blue-green algae in Noonan's Lake. To me, that is really something down to earth that would get the attention of fishermen, for example, and other people. So I know, it's a hodgepodge of ideas, but I basically want to express I'm tired of being told what to do. And I would like, that we also pick up on other topics again.
Sure. Yeah, and I think if that's your feeling, you're probably not the only one, and maybe the general there's a portion of the general public who feels that way as well.
Yeah, and that's why it would be nice, if our public entities, I am really looking to them. Hey, what are you guys doing to curb climate change? They could lead by example. So maybe we could help them along, come up with some ideas for them.
Yeah.
I just want to flag real quick before we continue. I'm not a huge fan of the air quotes dummies term. So maybe we could just proceed with not referring to folks who aren't actively working in the environmental field or spending all their free time thinking about it as being uninformed. We can just say folks not specifically in this sector right now or something to that effect. Just flagging it.
Okay. Yeah, appreciate that. Go ahead, Bruce.
Yeah. Well, maybe I'll say it one more time. Bettina had me worried for a second when she said dummies, and then the very next two words were Bruce Blackwell. And I thought, uh-oh, she's on to me. But thank goodness it was something else. Yes, going to what George said, and again, what Bettina said and others, and what I said a little bit earlier, I think in order to reach the wider audience, we need to have a topic that is written in such a way that it will intrigue people, and even a sort of a subtopic about what will be going on that's interesting and appealing to people, and perhaps further down in what we're sending out to people saying, this is a continuation in our series of community conversations, and maybe say about climate change or something, but put some things out there that will intrigue people that are not part of the people who already know. And this is what we've been getting for so many of these meetings, to get the people who already know. And it's not easy, but I think somehow we just have to get captivating headlines and subheadlines. And then if people come and tune in or come in person, give them some information that they didn't already have. Thank you.
Yeah, good point. And you know, to kind of follow up on that and bring us back to Melissa's suggestion, I think one thing that helps get people, you know, that might not be focusing on these issues as part of their occupation, or might not spend, you know, a considerable amount of their free time thinking about these things, the general population of Alachua County who might be concerned or sort of interested, but would benefit greatly from having a conversation like this. I think one way to get those kind of people, sorry, I think one way to get those kind of people more involved, as we're all kind of pointing to wanting to do, is to something like a public facing survey of what issues people want to have discussed. Because the first step in getting people to interested in something is to make them feel included in it, right? And so if we can get people to maybe give us input about what they'd like to see a conversation about, I think that's one way of doing that. So let's see, Bettina in the chat has one potential topic: what are public entities, for lack of a better terminology, doing to be sustainable? Okay, I'll add that as well. So I saw, I mean, there was some support for Melissa's idea of doing the public facing survey. Does anybody have any, does anybody not like that idea, or have any kind of, I don't know, caveats or criticisms or anything that, or should we talk about ways we can possibly implement that? I don't think we have to get rid of this list that we have, but I mean, that could potentially seed some of the survey ideas that that, you know, people see in the survey. Oh, Jeff Arnold is here. But what do we think? I mean, what is the general feeling about doing a public facing survey? Yeah, go ahead, David.
Yeah, I was just going to suggest that we put together a short list of topics that, you know, we really think, you know, are things that we want to cover, and things that, you know, we think that you know, the public might like to have us cover. But then just those are just options, and if they want something other than that, fine. Put this together in a kind of a survey, and then get that out to the public, and then get some demographics about, you know, persons. We don't have to have the name. We, you know, need demographics more than anything, just so we know, you know, they're a resident of Alachua County, age perhaps, you know, what would they consider, you know, their, you know, I don't know, their general, you know, maybe what political, you know, side they're on, Democrat, Republic, or conservative or liberal, you know, which you know, which from that standpoint, just to get, you know, some demographics, but then to go on and to really kind of get from them, you know, the ideas that here's what they would like to see us talk about. And, you know, if the ideas we presented, you know, gave them weren't, you know, the few suggestions we gave them weren't satisfactory, then, you know, well, do they have something they'd rather have us talk about?
Yeah, I like that. So essentially giving them potential topics, but also leaving it open to them suggesting their own, and then potentially collecting some demographic data from them.
Yeah, and by the way, I just want to throw in, I'm also all for, you know, moving back towards what's really been our, you know, our bailiwick, if that's a good word for it, and that's, you know, dealing with, you know, things that are hazardous to the environment. Not, you know, not that climate change isn't hazardous to the environment, but, you know, things that are more directly, you know, pollution being, you know, the main one, but, you know, I think there's other problems we have around that we can look at. And oh, by the way, the phrase, the thing for dummies I threw in, I'm the bad guy that used that first here, so I have to explain it. I think that I just couldn't think of anything better, and that to me expresses, you know, the idea of something that explains clearly and simply, you know, the basics of something to an individual or to group of people. And I consider myself one of those dummies on most things. So, you know, it would be, I think, I wasn't using it in a negative sense, but I can see where it's been overused and it tends to be negative, because I don't think any person, if they're a human being, they're not a dummy almost by definition. Okay, so.
Thanks, David. Go ahead, Melissa.
Yeah, so I think 2 points. One is the logistics of the survey, and then my second is what's in it. So the first, to that point, one is the question of how does it get distributed? And Mark, I suppose this is for you, like what forms can it go out on? Could it be put on social media? Could it be put out in some sort of countywide notice? Things to that effect. So that's point one. And then point two is as far as what's in it. Survey data, knowing your demographic data is really helpful if you're going to use that demographic data in a very intentional way, right? Like if for some reason we know that all 17-year-olds in zip code 32601 are interested in learning about fish, and like, great, we should host it in that zip code area. And we should very obviously talk about fish. However, I don't know how much capacity wise we have to do that. And so I don't really know how much it matters to know what someone's political party affiliation is or how old they are in this respect, because I doubt we're going to analyze that collectively as an EPAC group. And what we really want to know is what people want to hear about. And so I think if we ask about just a free response instead of putting suggestions into people's minds for what we think what they think we're looking for, you know, we could say example could include water quality, fishing in Noonan's Lake, how your yard looks, give some examples, but I don't think include our bigger, more convoluted topics for people to maybe feel shy at putting in their answer if it's not as elaborate. And then I think asking how they like to receive this information, whether that's having a short article to read or actually attending an in-person forum or tuning in online. I think that's more of the crux for me. And I also know that folks usually don't spend a ton of time on surveys. So keeping it short, keeping it sweet, and really using it to answer what I think are more of the core questions, which is what do people want to listen to and how will they actually engage in the conversation?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'm gonna. Yeah, that's a good point. Go ahead, George.
Well, thinking about the logistics of getting feedback, we might consider if there are any programs being carried out by EPD or extension that are sort of in the general realm of the area we want to address, and maybe have those folks help with a survey. And just, you know, say, hey, EPD is interested, or EPAC is interested in going forward with some kind of a community conversation or some kind of a program, and which kind of a topic would you favor seeing? You know, rather than just throwing it open to everybody by Facebook, you can get some stuff, get some feedback, but I don't know how many. You know, like it's already been acknowledged, a lot of times people look at that and pass it by, even if they have good intentions of coming back. But actually doing it through some of the already planned programs might be one strategy to get 30 or 40 surveys filled out at a hit.
So you're suggesting throwing the survey out to people in EPD or in an organization that already kind of does similar kind of outreach?
Yeah, I guess the idea would be to find out if other organizations already have programs on the calendar, even whether it's a Zoom program, and say, hey, you know, would you mind helping us with a survey. Extension does this all the time. And so it wouldn't be anything new to them.
Oh, I see. I see. Distributing the survey to the public through them,
Yeah, right.
not surveying them directly.
Yeah, exactly. And
Okay,
having
okay.
having them help with getting the returns, you know, perhaps right at that particular physical or Zoom meeting.
Yeah.
I just offer that as an idea of maybe getting some, you know, getting some more effective feedback.
Yeah. I like that. So, yeah, I mean, in terms of the logistics, I mean, we have a couple of kind of ideas about how to format the survey, right? So Melissa suggests keeping it very simple and short, which I think makes a lot of sense, because if, you know, every time you add a new item to a survey, it decreases the number of people that are going to go through the whole thing and fill it out. And it also makes it a little more intimidating. And so keeping it short and focusing on what topics are people interested in and what kind of format do they prefer, and then leaving it very open-ended, so not suggesting pre-written questions or pre-written topics. And then David kind of threw out a different idea right before that, that we have these topics listed and then have a space for them to put their own topic. So that's the formatting issue. And then we have the distribution question, which I'm still not sure, like in the kind of default scenario, how we would distribute a survey like this. Like would it, what would the like traditional channel be through EPAC, through Alachua County? And then can we modify that or supplement it by doing something like what you're suggesting, George, where we're going through these other organizations and asking them to distribute it as well. Those are things that I'm not quite sure about how to implement. Mark, do you have any just general feedback about what we would do in like the standard scenario of trying to get public input through a survey?
I have to check on our public affairs office, but just like when we put out the notices for the forum, they could be just, you know, as George has said, to a list of the topics. I think they could go to the public affairs office because it's sent out notice because they have thousands of people that get that. And therefore you got a wider net of input, and then they could have a survey or call in or respond. I can have an email response to me to say, these are the topics in rating that they prefer to exclude or include. And then they could include a write-in, like you said, if they want to know about fish or something, if they go, you know, we had other interests that came in that we don't necessarily, you know, see offhand, then that would give them the opportunity to say, yeah, we have an interest in these other issues, you know. I think we could go that route. I'd have to check with Stacy because I think the EPD mail out or information is a very small group of people that receive that. So I think the public affairs office would get you a much more broader potential audience of input.
Gotcha.
But I agree with what George was saying. If you just kind of left it blank, I think you're not going to have much input that way, because they're going to go, well, you know, give them something to start with. And they go, even if it's only 3 or 4 topics, they go, yeah, I like to hear more and more about this one or that one, and less so on other ones. But, you know, if you just did write-in, I don't know that you'd get, you know, much feedback that way.
Okay. Unless somebody had like something very specific that they had been thinking about that was
And
just
you
came to
will-
mind.
Yes, you will get those, and it may be specific to that one individual, that they don't like what their neighbor's doing or something, and says, well, those, you kind of have to look at those individually, and it may require just a response back to that individual on that issue rather than have it as a presentation topic.
Sure. I'm gonna, I am about to leave today's meeting, so I'm gonna hand it over to David. But before I go, I just wanted to also mention that the survey that that was emailed out to everybody, that's kind of serving now as like updating topics that we're considering internally. I added Bettina's suggestion and Jeff's suggestion from the chat. So what are public entities doing to be sustainable and the impacts of going septic to sewer? I added those as well, since they were suggested in the chat there. And it seems like there's still more discussion to be had on this. So I'm going to hand it over to you, David.
Okay.
And Bruce has his hand up.
Yes, I realize. Bruce?
Yes, two things. One is when it comes to a survey, surveys are very difficult to create to get to the root of what you want. You can't just dash off a survey. And so we might even need some help from somebody, perhaps one of the universities, guiding the way the questions are asked and so forth, because it makes an awful lot of difference. The other thing is, and I hate to throw a wet blanket on something, we're not tied. We did not get a tablet down from the heavens that said our next community conversation had to be climate change. Listening to all of the discussions today, I'm wondering if we should just scrap climate change and have a community conversation based on something else. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Bruce. I think that's what we're doing really right now. We're looking at, what would the next one be on based upon the, what we received back from this this survey. And I'm with everyone who says it doesn't necessarily have to be on climate change. I mean, I think that there are other problems that we're probably better, suited to deal with. By the way, as far as how it would be distributed, I originally was thinking, okay, something, get the son to put it in. Also, we've got other ways, of dealing with actually having students, have copies of it. They can actually have people fill out. Through the county's public notice system, the way of actually just putting out the form, and the form, they just print the form out and do what they can with it. The county's Facebook, EPD, IFAS. I mean, all these different ways of getting things around to people, that exist, I think are great ways, and I think we should pursue it all of them at the same time. I mean, I think anything that we can get this form distributed by and say, here's the deadline when we need it back. And, if we can get someone from the university real quick to come back to us, fine. But if not, I'd like to see us do something on this within the next month or so. So, George Kapati?
Yeah, Melissa mentioned, and maybe a few others about, Bruce mentioned about Noonan's Lake, and then Melissa mentioned fishermen and sort of attracting them, drawing them in. One of the persistent concerns I have, since as you know, David, I've always focused on adverse health effects as one of my preoccupations. In most fishing regulation books, particularly freshwater, there is an advisory page in most every state listing lakes and bodies of water that have certain kinds of pollution, or more specifically advisories on which fish are safe to eat and in what quantity, whether you're pregnant or not, whether you can eat predator fish or prey only. And there is, in some respects, one way of looking at this is there are few topics that have more immediate health effects than eating the wrong stuff. The methylating mercury of microorganisms in fresh water, So many people are either subsistence fishermen or just enjoying the pleasure of eating fish. I like it as well. I eat tons of fish every week, but that is an example of something that a topic that has immediate health consequences and not just future stuff.
Yeah. Okay, I like that as one of the subjects. I mean, I have no problem with that. I think, you know, and I like Melissa's idea of making these very simple and very, you know, they could even be in a single, here's suggestion examples, here's several examples here, you know, but not, you know, make them a real formal list of things at the top with just an other at the bottom, kind of like the list that we got, which is fine for us. But, you know, when you're looking for people to put in, you know, put out what they really want, you don't want to list things and just give them a checking box. You want to give them, you know, you want to give them, here's some examples, but, you know, what do you want? And then give them, you know, some space to put in what they want. But someone I saw it was Bettina perhaps said that, you know, we should, actually, I should just look, because the idea was that, yeah, it was Melissa. Why don't we just use our next meeting to put the survey together? And I'm all for doing that, because I don't think we're going to get it done, you know, get anything done tonight of that nature. And we don't really have a quorum left. So I think that's, you know, not that we use quorums anymore because of the fact that we're online, but I think that's probably the best way to deal with it. With that in mind, has anyone else had anything else on this subject? I wanted to spend a couple minutes on the bills, if anyone has anything to say on that. And I'm certainly all for leaving early tonight, because I'm recovering from, you know, iron deficiency. And you know, I've actually had 2 nights in the last week. One night I slept 24 hours the whole day. And the next one was night before last, I slept 18 hours. So, you know, my body is recovering from this, you know, very, very slowly. So if there aren't any other comments on this, you know, I'm not hearing any or not seeing any hands raised on that. Has everyone had a chance to go through the bills that were listed? Yes, no? I mean, yeah, okay. George, any comments on what you saw?
I unfortunately didn't get a chance to read them.
Other George, I'm sorry.
Oh,
George,
sorry.
Yeah, he raised his hand there, having read one at least.
I know I just perused through them, David. I didn't have a chance to study them. I guess some of the stuff that I'm most bothered by it is the impacts that some of these bills have on local government.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, the bills that were listed, I think were, you know, at least a couple of them that I looked at were bills, you know, I know were being promoted by Democrats and, you know, in the House and in the Senate, and there's just no chance that they're going to pass anything. You know, they're going to get, you know, voted down, and because there's actually opposing bills going in the opposite direction being promoted by Republicans. And I think that those are, you know, they're already moving through committees, whereas all the ones I looked at of these bills here were not even making it to committees, or they were slated for their first committee and hadn't made it through that. And even though they've been proposed, you know, at the beginning of the session. So yeah, there are some really horrendous bills being put out this time from the legislature. I would venture to say that there's some of the worst bills. This is the worst legislature I've seen. And you should probably go through some of the bills that are out there. I mean, they are really, really dreadful. George, what do you think about that one where they want to say that the farmers can avoid following IFAS recommendations for, you know, how much fertilizer they can use, and they can use whatever amount they, you know, they can get, you know, I don't know, some kind of a person that's going to act on their behalf, I imagine, you know, to say that it would be okay for them to use. Have you read that, Bill?
Oh, I'm very familiar with that one. Yeah, that's Senate Bill Senate Bill 1000, I think, is the number of it. I think it's Albritton.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one's rather scary. it basically addresses the notion that growers don't like being regulated based on, well, don't like being regulated, but also don't like being regulated on the IFAS nutrient management recommendations. And Senate Bill 712 a couple years ago has put FDACs in the position of doing what they call implementation verification visits. And so they go out and visit farmers to record, get a copy of fertilizer records from the growers. And right now it's just a form that the grower fills out. But the bill would allow farmers, now it does have some requirements that farmers have to be enrolled in the BMP program, which assumes that they filed notification of intents for the properties that they farm or the owner of the farm has filed. So at least they have to be in the BMP program, and they have to keep records. I think they have to prove that I think there's a 5-year sort of look back involved, but essentially if they've met some basic requirements, then they can have, as I understand the bill, they can have a certified, probably the most likely ones that they will employ will be what we call certified crop advisors, who have gone through some training. And certified crop advisors are largely private consultants and folks affiliated with fertilizer industry, which doesn't, I'm not saying that's automatically a bad thing, because at least they have gone through some training, but they're allowed to go out with the farmer and write what they call a tailored, the bill uses the word tailored fertilizer program. And so that in essence will provide an environment where growers can develop fertilizer programs that aren't in the realm of what the university recommendations are. So in a sense, it's going to neuter, it could possibly neuter fertilizer recommendations from extension and the university.
There was one section in there, I believe, though, that dealt with until some further research or science, could be gotten that would prove that was, that limit that was set, by IFAS, that was, or some other university was the right level to be using, right? I mean, wasn't there something like that in there? I mean, it sounded like a low hurdle to,
Well, it was, yeah, it's to cause, and there's another bill that FDACS has been promoting to cause more funding for scientific review of the current fertilizer recommendations and revision of the fertilizer recommendations. So essentially, we're going to see, we possibly will see increases in nitrogen and phosphorus recommendations. And I've had a lot of discussions with, I'm okay with revising recommendations if you have ample peer-reviewed science behind it. That's how we do things. I'm all for that. And IFAS has been doing it continually for a century, really. But this will change a lot of that. And I've had lots of discussions with people that know, we talk about BMAPs and TMDLs, and it just seems to me that when you increase the allowed fertilizer, particularly in water bodies that have a BMAP, that in effect what you're doing is you're requiring farmers then to be accountable for even more fertilizer to remove from that water body or watershed. And unless the BMAP, unless the TMDL and the BMAP are then changed to change that burden for agriculture, then agriculture, whether they realize it or not, has de facto increased their burden for nutrient removal.
Yeah, and I know this whole thing really seems to kind of put it back to it relieves the grower of the burden of, really approving that, what they need to do. And it forces IFAS to go one step farther when, you probably already got, I would guess, before you would put something out there, it's already gone through, as you said, scientific and peer review, right? So why would they be saying we can override that with something just based upon, a non-academic, person's review of it? It seems like the totally wrong direction for us to be going.
David, what you're talking about, and
Wait, let me get Melissa's first, because she did have her hand up a minute
Oh.
ago. Melissa, did you have a comment on this? You said something
Oh,
about it.
yeah,
was
just
getting final review.
just generally, I put in the chat, there's 1,000 Friends of Florida, which was Paul Owens came and spoke to us about 2070 report. So there's a great webinar on the legislative wrap up. So they go through what made it through session, what didn't, kind of what to look forward to or not. And also just to plug that session does end, I believe, March 11th. So if you do feel strongly about something, call your reps because it's almost done.
Yep. And that one's one that's going to be in there. Yeah. Bruce.
yeah, I was just going to say, going back to the bills you were talking about and what you're talking about in the legislature, it just is a wonderful illustration of the old saying, absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and it just goes back to demonstrate that our legislature doesn't work for the people of Florida. It works for, for agribusiness, and it works for, for other business and corporations. I mean, it doesn't work for us. So I don't see much of anything that's doing for us, at least. And the one that passed that, who was it? What's his name again? The one who put that bill forth?
Albritton?
Yeah,
Albritton.
Yeah, Albritton has a record of just being for bad bills. I mean, really, really, super bad bills, from agriculture. And, I think he almost is, an unknown, or maybe a hidden employee of the, of some, what is the Florida Bureau? What's that? That the one that's it's the the agency that kind of works for them. I'm trying to think of their name too. I'm sorry, I forget. But we have a local person who's pretty much on top of that, and they come up with some of the craziest things. They really do. And it's not just against agriculture, but it's primarily agriculture that I've noticed. Albritton, pretty much supports various bills that are they're all for agriculture, but they don't consider the other side of things at all. Not considering what the impact of the environment's going to be. So that wasn't a bill that was on our list, but I thought it was one that was really bad, that really needed to be on there. Okay. Well, unless anyone else has anything that they'd like to discuss, I'm gonna go ahead and call this meeting over. And what we'll do is next month, we'll put it on the agenda. Mark, if you would, that we will actually work on that for at least, half the time. We'll putting together, a good survey for this. And so everyone kind of be thinking of that. Maybe you can put your own survey together, just kind of use it as a template for when we go to discuss. And that way we'll have, we can focus on less on, starting from scratch, and we'll just have something, we'll just kind of work what works best for everyone together, come up with a consensus of opinion of what works best. That sound good?
Good.
Yay or nay, or? Okay.
Yes, sounds good.
Okay, everyone, with that, I think we'll head out here. Mark, can you stick around just for a second? I have some questions to ask you. It's outside of the realm of what the board needs to deal with, but anyone else who wants to stick around can. So we're done.
All righty. Thank you, and feel better.
Feel better. Thanks.
Yeah.
Bye, everyone.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Night.
So Mark, my questions were on I had someone ask me recently a question about whether the county has anything that links, trees and the protection that having trees gives to stormwater runoff. And another question, which was closely related to that, whether there were any new state preemptions which affect how the county can deal with local tree protection.
There was, as I don't know the results of it yet. There is a House bill or Senate bill that, just like previous years where there was trying to do the preemption from local government requirements on tree
Yeah.
regulation.
Yeah.
I don't know the results of that yet. I don't know, if it's. I haven't heard anything about it since it was submitted early in the session. As far as trees and stormwater, that's a good question. We don't hinder anybody wanting to put trees in stormwater areas, but it's something that is not exactly encouraged, I think, by particularly the water management districts, because it does, well, two things. It creates a problem for maintenance, particularly as you know, most of the basins locally here are all dry basins and they can be easily mowed without any trees. I'm not saying if they planted trees in rows, they could just mow around them. It'd be easy. But I think at the same time, I don't think it's a valid excuse to not have trees due to robbing storage volume, because they take up less than 1% the trunk size. Unless the site gets totally overrun with trees, I don't see, that being an issue. There could be some restricted flow, but I think from a landscaping standpoint, it's better to have trees. This looks better, even if it's just cypress, but.
Didn't the county have something where, you could split up what you had in terms of lawn areas with trees and all this? I mean, so that essentially it was, they didn't they find that was better?
Yes, in fact, some of these basins, they have a forebay area where they do the initial capture the flow into like a open deeper pocket and then overflows into a shallow zone. And they got open space credit if they incorporated those components. But now they don't get open space credit, but it's still encouraged to allow additional stormwater. It's a little bit, I think they've gotten away from it, David, because it's a little bit more maintenance requirement on those sites. You got to go in there and earth grade it, not only initially, but every like 5 years or so. You got to go back there and regrade it out, take sediment out, and people just don't want to, depend on an HOA to do that.
Yeah, I think one of the concerns here or questions was to, has anyone able to use saying to keep trees, based upon the ground that, they do help, to keep, what goes into the stormwater a little cleaner. And, I kind of agree with that idea, but the more important one of these, I guess, whether there are new state preemptions that, that affect local attempts to protect trees. And I know we did that thing a couple of years ago where we had the arborist, and we reviewed, a lot of information with him in terms of the species of the tree, the size of the tree, the age of the tree. And we were trying to get a way to, to prevent just clear cutting of lots,
Right.
And I was hoping that, we had something there as well that, kind of use the idea that trees, because they, if they're used in these areas, these open areas, that it does help keep, the water that's going down the drain, so to speak, a little cleaner. So,
Right.
but, I don't know if there's actually, I forget which community was doing it, but there's actually a community that's actually using that argument themselves or trying to use that. And I was wondering, what kind of arguments we have, because I've taken what we did with our our plan with fertilizer, and I've passed it on to several other communities who are doing their best to get those things in to work. I spent a lot of time talking with some members of the over in St. Johns County of the members of the soil and water district there, and they were very interested in what we were doing. So I sent them a whole bunch of information and connected them up with with people that could help them from Alachua County that would be able to help them out on that. I don't know if they ever contacted anyone else who went any farther, because I gave them a heck of a lot of information. They may not have needed it, but so I'm kind of interested in that. If you hear anything on either of these, if you can kind of copy me to that, or if you
I'll
think of
find
something-
out what the status of that House bill is. I know also and for some of them, they are required to have 20% canopy preserved in a subdivision of what's there. And it has to be, the design of additional landscaping has to demonstrate that it receives 30% canopy closure within 50 years. So in some sites, they do incorporate the trees within their storm. If you got a low area, rather than take all of it out, if the grade is suitable for a stormwater basin, they will actually, and we were reviewing one now where they just keeping the trees. And so it's not, they don't stack as much volume. It's just a shallow catchment basin, and then it goes from there to another basin. But rather than remove the trees, which are aesthetic, they're just saying, well, we'll just keep it at grade and just, mow around the trees.
What I want to find out is if there's any preemptions that the state is making relative to, cutting trees that is actually, allows people to cut trees, even though our land use ordinances say not to.
Right.
And, that maybe that's something that our current arborists can answer
Yeah.
best. But, I want to know if things have changed in that respect, because that would be a really, that would just show to me that, developers have gone, because local communities were saying, don't cut all the trees down. They just simply went to the legislature to get a workaround for that, which is what they're getting in that, ordinance. But I don't know. I know that we have some good, land use ordinances here in Alachua County to keep us from having to deal with wetlands, right? We don't allow wetlands, and there certainly are preemptions in that area that the state has come up with, but they're not preventing us from protecting our wetlands, and they're not protecting us from keeping I don't know if there's been anybody trying to get a phosphate mine in Alachua County, but I know that we our land use ordinances say you can't have a phosphate mine in Alachua County. I'm just curious what kind of luck we have. I mean, is it, if you write your land use and have it in there before the state passes something, is it gonna fly, or is it something that if you write the land use in a certain way, it allows you to do it anyway? I'm just curious what it does, because I know that the states tried to keep some things in terms of local home rule in place, and but everything they don't like, they seem to want to preempt the hell out of.
Oh, it's bad this year. You're right. Some of the stuff is really off the rail this year.
How do we keep our wetlands? I mean, I understand that you were virtually, 0% wetlands, get destroyed. I mean, I'm sure some get destroyed, but I mean, in terms of, you got a block of 20 acres of wetland area, they're not allowed to just say, well, we're going to cut it in half and we're going to develop 10. I mean, otherwise that would violate what I've been told, at least by people, that we don't, have any,
Right.
virtually none. I mean, again, when I say half an acre here or there somewhere maybe, but there's virtually none. And how do we keep that in place, with I'm sure the state has all sorts of, things to try and get around that.
Fortunately, not so much yet, I think, because the feds are watching it closely, officially with the delegation of the Clean Water Act, the 404 program, the Army Corps is keeping them at bay. But for the most part, yeah, they're staying out of wetlands. But the trees have been, as you noted, have been a real controversy every year it comes up, there's somebody wanting to do a preemption criteria.
I read some law. I don't know whether it was a bill or a law, but I read the bill part of it that said that, developers, something about developers could cut trees regardless of what, local law said. I mean, it was one of those that essentially was a preemption. of local
They
law.
ruled that if it could, if an arborist, a licensed arborist determined that it's a hazardous tree, quote, then they don't have to mitigate for that lost tree. So if it appears like the tree could present a problem, if it fell on a house, typically, that they will allow them to go ahead and qualify as a hazard tree and they can take it out. But
they would still have to be abiding by county rules otherwise, right? And if the county arborist said that tree is not a danger, it's out in the middle of a field with nothing around it, then they couldn't really, even though they had their own licensed arborist to say that they could cut it down, they couldn't cut it down, correct?
well, that's the way that's my understanding, the way that's. I mean, yeah, you hope that people would not be that unscrupulous and say that that's a hazardous tree, but their license is on the line. But so I don't know. I don't know the results, but I'll find out tomorrow from our arborist as to where that sits this year.
Yeah, and plus I know we have some county, people that, they're above the arborist level. This is what we were told in the previous arborist, that are above that arborist, that we're kind of pushing him to do all sorts of stuff anyway, for developers. And so
Right.
it's unlikely, that is something that's going to be contested. If they got, a licensed arborist cut something, they're probably going to be able to cut it in Letcher County. But I wanted to know just where that was at, because we went through an awful lot of effort to try and, a lot of time.
Y'all did.
Try and
That's been a lot of
protect trees
time
in
on it.
Letcher County, and I'd like to make sure that we didn't just spend all that time for nothing to turn around and have the state, come and preempt that,
Yeah, that would be sad. That would be one really
Yeah.
sad situation. So yeah, I'll find out about it and let you know.
Okay. By the way, have rewritten the people in Afran with the Florida Rights of Nature Network, people that wrote the amendment for the state. We've rewritten it again, okay, for 2024. And, the language in this version of it is just beautiful. And the one thing that, we all pretty much agreed on that was most important is that local government should have the right to pass ordinances and protective, if it's water and it's wetlands, that cannot be preempted by the state. And that was, to me, it's this home rule issue, that if they're going to allow, the state can preempt whatever they want to, it just takes away home rule. And that's not a democracy from my standing. But I just wanted you to know that that's what the kind of thing we're working on. And I'll get you a copy of that when I'm finished with it. We're actually, I think, finished. What we've done is we've said we want it reviewed by 3 expert constitutional attorneys, Florida constitutional attorneys, to tell us whether it'll meet the single subject, criteria, which the state Supreme Court, goes through. So that, when we collect 200,000 plus signatures, they don't just say, oh, no, you can't do this because, it violates that. So, we made a pretty stiff, test on ourselves to get these 3, different attorneys, that are well-known and well-expected to do that. So when we get that done, as soon as that part's done, I'll get you a copy of this, and you'll see, maybe even sooner than that, I'll get you a copy of it.
Okay. Good.
Okay, thank you very much.
Nice to
Have a good night.
You
And
too.
thank you again for all that you do for us.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Yeah, bye.